I grew up in a Christian home. As far back as I can remember, church and Sunday school every Sunday, Awanas every Wednesday, prayers at mealtime and bedtime. You know, the checklist. Sunday school was my favorite. They painted a beautiful picture of Jesus as my best friend, a good life, lots of happiness, fairy tale Christianity. I got baptized at 10 years old, and I loved Jesus, and I wanted all these promises. At 16, I of course knew everything. Anyone who asked, I'd proudly answer, I am an atheist. But it's not possible to be angry with something you don't believe exists, and I was angry with God. I hated him, and I had no problem telling him how much I hated him. The night before my 19th birthday, I was filled with questions. God, where were you when I was molested? Or when others took out their anger on me? Where were you when I started smoking weed and drinking? Or when I started practicing witchcraft? Where were you when that guy forced himself on me, or the miscarriage of that baby? Why did you let me become bulimic? Why didn't you stop me from cutting myself over and over? Where were you when my fiancé held me captive for months and when he killed my unborn baby? Where were you when I started selling myself? Why would you let such horrible things happen to someone that you love? It had been far too much, and I tried to end my life. My mom said she had been really tired and wanted to take a nap, but something kept nudging her to stay awake. She heard me hit the floor, pried the door off the hinges, and called 911. I spent years being angry that she saved my life. Over time, new questions came up. God, why didn't you just let me die? Why let me live so another guy could force himself on me, and another, and another? I stopped counting after the 5th time. Why did you let me marry someone that would never be faithful to me? Why would you let him manipulate me into having a baby with him? Where are you in this? At 26, I was convinced that my husband and my 2-year-old would be better off without me, so I again was ready to end my life. I felt a nudging to say goodbye to a good friend of mine. I didn't understand why. She wasn't someone that I knew in real life, just from an online video game, and we weren't super close. But that shoving was so persistent, I couldn't ignore it. I told her I'd be without a phone or internet for a while and just wanted to say goodbye. She knew something was wrong, so she pushed and pushed until I told her. She was a Christian. She shared God's love with me that night. She had me watch a video called Lifehouse Skit and had me grab my Bible, which I had for the sole purpose of highlighting all the things that didn't make sense and couldn't possibly be true. She said to turn to Psalm 139. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. In that moment, my eyes were opened. I was filled with overwhelming peace and joy. I started attending my parents' church and tried to get involved. I still had the mentality that if I did the checklist, God would make my life good, and that just isn't reality. My husband kept cheating. During a separation, a friend I was staying with forced himself on me and I got pregnant. My husband was trying to manipulate his way back in, and I hoped just saying I was pregnant would make him back off, but it didn't. I scheduled an abortion. I didn't want this thing, this horrible reminder. The morning of, I couldn't go through with it. Thou shalt not kill kept going through my mind. I went to the first appointment confirming the pregnancy and did not see a doctor again until I was 8 months pregnant. We had reconciled, and we, with our now 3.5-year-old, were in Louisiana, broke, starving, living in a tiny bedroom in a garbage hoarder's house. With barely eating, the fetal movements had slowed way down. I thought I lost it, so I went to the hospital. They did an ultrasound, and the moment I saw her, I fell in love. She wasn't some monster or a punishment. She was this tiny human that God blessed me with. Something good and beautiful out of something horrible. We had been attending a church there, and I asked if they would help us to get home so I could be near my family. 3 days before I was scheduled for induction, we got into an apartment. Things were good for a while, then the husband quit his job. We were facing being in the same situation as Louisiana. I took a job that essentially was selling myself again. I'd come home and get screamed at and called every name in the book. I begged him to find a job so I could quit, but he wouldn't. He just got more and more belligerent. That led to him threatening to not take care of the baby and even becoming abusive towards our son. So I let him keep the apartment, the car, everything. The kids and our personal items came with me, and that was the end of it. He only wanted to see them if I was around, so I stopped taking them. I stayed with the job, moved us in with a customer, and on top of the excessive drinking, began using hard drugs. One day while driving, feeling hopeless and lost, I heard God's voice. It's impossible to describe, but unmistakable. He said, choose drugs and alcohol and this will be your life until it kills you, or choose me and you will finally be free. And then nothing. Silence. Separation. That was the day I started trying to get clean. The withdrawals were horrible. By day 3, I was so frustrated I'd give in, relapsing every 3 days for a year and a half. Of course, that led to more feelings of hopelessness and more like a failure. Multiple visits from DCFS for the emotional and psychological abuse going on at home. And I can't believe I stayed so long. I really thought I could love him enough to make him better, but I was wrong. They eventually said that we had to leave or they were taking my kids. So we found ourselves in the domestic violence shelter. My son, 9 years old, had a psychological break. He started attacking me and his sister. He ended up in the hospital near St. Louis. While he was there, I was able to line up a house for us to go to, one that was just ours, something we'd never had. I finally quit the hard drugs, but I kept drinking. Just after Christmas 2017, I got busted for a DUI with the kids in the car. By the time the police were loading me into the squad car and the kids into another, I was blacking out. So the kids went to my mom's for the night. The next day we met back up at my house, had a quiet day. While making an early dinner, there was a knock on the door, and of course it was DCFS. I knew they'd be coming. She said with the previous investigations being open and this one starting, the kids could not stay with me. My kids, who would fight with each other nonstop, sat in the living room clinging to each other, bawling. I begged her to let them stay. I explained I was never drinking again, I just hadn't had it in me to dump them. There was no getting out of this. They went to live with my mom. I had the thought, well, my only reasons for not drinking are gone now, why bother? Instead, I dumped everything down the drain and just hit the floor. I had taken care of these kids since day one. I fought for them, protected them, and now they were gone. All I did that night was cry and scream and snuggle their stuffed animals. I did this. My kids being heartbroken was my doing. My sober date is December 30th of 2017. Since I had started drinking at 16, when I quit, I had the maturity of a 16-year-old. I didn't have any coping skills. I prayed, God, I don't know what to do. Tell me where to go and I'll go. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. I followed his direction. I started attending AA, and while at Tazwood for my first drug test, I got myself into counseling and outpatient drug and alcohol treatment. I was facing a felony charge since the kids had been in the vehicle with me. I did everything I could, not to get out of trouble, but to get better, so that if I could get them home, something like this would never happen again. By the grace of God, they were able to return home 2 weeks later, contingent on keeping up with all my efforts and tests. In those first few months of sobriety, I lost my license, my job, my house, people who meant a lot to me, but I kept going. God, just give me the strength to do this. Back and forth court every 3 weeks, alternating DUI hearings and DCFS hearings, each extending out to see what would happen with the other. At the end, the judge gave me a non-conviction. He said I needed to be proud of myself for what I'd done and that he didn't want to see me in his courtroom again. I completed treatment, and my therapist worked hard with me and eventually said I no longer needed therapy. I remarried and we had our little girl. I realized while writing all this, all those questions I had for God, not once did I stop to listen for an answer. Looking back, I can hear him asking, Kat, where were you? Where were you when I created the heavens and the earth and all that is in them? Where were you while I was creating you? Who are you to question God? I've never felt more convicted. I know now that a lot of the bad I went through was my own doing. I had no business trying to fill a God-shaped hole with everything but God. The places I went and the people I was around, I had no business being. But no matter how horrible a lot of it was, I'm grateful for it. I had to completely break down and destroy myself and hate myself to become the person I am today. I thank God for who I am and how He's used those situations to refine me. Even 5 years ago, if you had asked me if I would be an actual member of a church or loved by the other members, or be asked to fill certain positions within the church, I would not have believed you. Every day I pray for continual renewing of my heart and mind. God, keep working on me, keep changing me. I long to be like Jesus. Life isn't perfect, and God never promised it would be. He promised we'd never face things alone. While in the middle of the storm, it's hard to see Him or His plan unfolding, but looking back, we can see His fingerprints on everything. I pray that God shows Himself to each and every one of you today in some way that is just undeniable, and that when you share that story with others, you fill them with hope.